Articulate, balance, and critique. What do you get when you put all three together? Hi, and welcome to the Law Simplified, the world's largest independent online law school platform. I'm your instructor, Shaveen Bandaranaike. One of the fundamental issues that most students have, irrespective of the jurisdiction, is the ability to A. read a problem or essay question properly, and associated with that, B. put down on paper their mindset, the thoughts that they have in relation to the issues being presented and how exactly they believe a response should be crafted. If you like the type of content that I make on this YouTube channel, do subscribe to the Law Simplified and leave a comment below so that I have an idea of what you'd like to see in terms of your academics or professional careers in law. I would highly recommend the comprehensive online law school platform as well, complete with theory, tutorial, and workshop lessons based on the actual one-on-ones that I've conducted with my fast track and masterclass students globally. Right, what do I mean by articulating, balancing, and critiquing? Quite simply, most students tend to get pigeonholed or tunnel visioned with a very particular template that may have been advanced to them by a university or an institute. Oftentimes, the rubric that has been presented to them might not even be by an academic or a jurist, but by a peer, by someone who's senior to them, or even a friend or colleague. This particular framework or this particular template you might be well aware of. It is called the IRAC method. Now granted, there are different versions of this. Different universities and different jurisdictions may have a permutation of IRAC in certain ways. And oftentimes students tend to get flustered by how exactly to implement this method when it comes to addressing a problem-based question or even an essay for that matter. Over the past decade of teaching law and having taught students from all around the world, one common denominator that I do see is how stiff students tend to get the moment they have this technical framework or this technical template that has been presented to them. Oftentimes, students tend to fall by the wayside, so to speak, purely because they are unaware of what exactly the question requires, since they focus entirely on this fulfillment, so to speak, on IRAC alone. Now, first of all, I want to preface this by saying that there's nothing wrong with the IRAC method or going about answering a question in your examinations using IRAC. But what I would like to impress upon you is that if you logically think about it, when you have 100 students utilizing a template quite similar to that, granted with different styles of implementation, it's quite easy to stand out if you go a step beyond that and look a bit deeper than what other students would do. So this is where what I suggested comes into the picture. Articulate, balance, and critique. Take every single issue that you might see in a question. It can be a problem-based scenario or an essay. Firstly, take the core element or the fundamental issue and think to yourself, how am I going to frame this problem? Now, framing depends on one of two things. It depends on the instruction that has been given to you. Essentially, if it's a problem-based scenario, you might have been told to advise a particular party. Or on the other hand, it might literally be a discussion. The question itself might be open-ended and you're not representing any one person. You're supposed to look at it from the bigger picture standpoint. So then, articulation is about framing it in the appropriate manner. Think of it as putting it to a layman, a client, in a manner that he or she would understand. And if it's a question that relates to advising that person, frame it in a manner that is not only comprehensible, but positive in terms of his or her outcome. Secondly, balance. Now, as a legal professional, as someone who's going into the fraternity, you ought to be objective. Now, what I mean by that is not to look at every single possibility, but consider the fundamental issue that you have framed in that articulation step and assess what are the key demerits that particular argument has. So for example, if there's a potential defense that the other side might have, if there is a weakness or presumption that you're making that is relatively subjective, try and balance out those interests to show the examiner that you are well aware of the other side of things. And why that is relevant is because it indicates to the examiner that you are aware of the different possibilities and the permutations. It's just that you have taken a conscious effort to pick one over the other. Now, step number 3 arguably is the most important. Critique. Whichever issue that you have framed, you've considered on a balance the problems or defenses that are applicable. You need to now put your opinion into it, your own argument. Assess and weigh the pros and cons and determine the best outcome for whoever that you're advising, or if it's a discussion in terms of the overall circumstances. Right. Now I know that this might relatively be abstract, but start thinking about your questions from now on in this context. Think whether you have articulated it properly, have you framed the question appropriately, have you balanced the different interests, both adverse and otherwise, to your own cause, and then have you critiqued it logically to show the examiner that you've picked a path and an argument that is suitable for the scenario. Now, if this was a bit abstract and you'd like to see this put into practice, make sure you leave a comment below and I'll try and get around to putting it down on paper by virtue of answering a question in a workshop format. But if you'd like to see what I've done overall up until this point with my Fast Track and Masterclass students, I would highly recommend the workshop series, which is available on the online law school platform, where we break down questions in a tutorial format and then articulate, balance and critique a response completely from scratch. That being said, until the next time that we meet, have fun, stay safe, and as always, obey the law.